Hello and welcome to a new video. Now, as you've guessed from the title, this is my worst and most disappointing books of 2020. Now, I have been procrastinating filming this video because if you're on Twitter, you would have probably seen a few weeks back a massive booktuber who is like a champion for middle grade and just reading in general was attacked for doing this video. So yeah, I'm a little bit about doing this, but you know what, these are my opinions. If you do not agree with them, that's absolutely fine. I am in no way saying that the authors, there's nothing bad on the authors, it's just my opinion on the books in this video. So I'm going to start with the most disappointing and then do the worst, because the most disappointing, they weren't necessarily that I did not enjoy the books, it was just the case of I was disappointed based on my expectations that I had for the books. So let's just get stuck in, shall we? So the first book was actually one of the earlier books I read in the year, and I did give this a 3-star. So I didn't dislike it, I was just very disappointed because I did think it would be like a 4 or maybe 5-star, and I did actually get an ARC of this, and that was High Fire by Eoin Colfer. So I thought I would love this. It was literally just sold as dragons and everything, which there were dragons, don't worry, there were dragons, but I just did not like the writing style of this. I have never read anything by this author before, but they are just such a well-known author that I had such high expectations that I would absolutely adore this. And to be honest, I cannot tell you much about this because it hasn't stuck with me. All I remember was that this is from the perspective of the dragon, and I don't know, I can't really explain why I didn't particularly like it. I just was cringing so much at the writing style, and I'm not actually sure if this was supposed to be young adult or adult, but it did feel pretty juvenile and I just wasn't a fan, and I was a little bit gutted. Next up is The Last Wish by Andrzej Sapkowski. I hope I've said that right. I did look up pronunciations, but I'm really bad with pronunciations. However, this is technically the first book in the Witcher series. I read this because obviously the TV show was coming out and I wanted to watch it. So I read this first. This is actually, I think it's 0.5, and I did not realise this. So the reason I'm disappointed in it is because of my lack of research. So this one is fully on me. I take full responsibility for being disappointed by this because I looked it up and this was the first one. And I got it from the library, and this is basically short stories, but they're not split into short stories. It's just one, like, it looks like a novel, and I thought it was the first book, and there is constant like flashbacks. If you've seen the TV series, it's very well done from the book, and yeah, there's a lot of like going back and forth, and it wasn't clear in the book when it's going back and forth, so it's just like mind screw, like literally. So this one is completely my fault that I was disappointed because I went into it straight away. I hadn't read any of the actual series and I went into this not knowing anything. However, the first series is based off of this, but I should have read the first proper book first, which I could be wrong on this, but I think it's Blood of Elves or Sword of Destiny. Although actually no, now I'm saying that, I think Sword of Destiny is the next lot of short stories. I think that's 0.75 or something. I'm probably wrong about this, so if I am, I'm sorry. But the basic reason is because I went into this first before I knew anything else about it, and it was very confusing for me. So it's a disappointment because of my lack of research on the series. So I did give this 3 stars still. I did enjoy it. It was just not what I thought it was, because I thought it was the first book in the series. So I was a bit disappointed in that, but I did still love this one, and I will be continuing this series because it was good. So even though I was disappointed by it, I still loved it, and I will still be continuing the series, both books and TV show. The next one that I was disappointed with was Murder Most Unladylike by Robin Stevens. I was very hyped about this. Gavin at How to Train Your Gavin was raving about this. Jade at JD Ray Reads was not. And I didn't actually expect to love this after hearing Jade's comments, especially with what the comments were. So even though I was disappointed, it was sort of an expected disappointment, but I had already bought this before that point. So by the time I did get around to reading it, I was pretty disappointed at how it was written. So I have talked about this in my vlogs and my wrap-ups, but the main character is bullied. She's Chinese, she's in a British school, and she's bullied by both the students and the teachers. And I understand that it was made in the it's set in the 1930s, I think, but I still don't think that's a good enough excuse. Like, there was literally, her being bullied brings literally nothing to the storyline, and I do genuinely think that if it wasn't for that, this would have got a much higher rating than it did, from me anyway. So I gave this a 2-star. I do think that it would have got a 4-star if it hadn't been for that. That really brought it down for me, and it's not one I'm going to reread. I'm not continuing the series, and I don't want to put it on my worst books list because it's not a bad book. I just think this one element of it was unnecessary and brought my rating down and my thoughts down on it. So it is a disappointment for me rather than a worst book. So yeah, this was a shame. Okay, so now we're heading on to the worst books, and I'm gonna start with 2 by the same author. Now this is an author I have enjoyed his stuff previously, and so it was pretty much a disappointment that I hated these, but also they're like 2 of the worst books I read last year. So that is the first one. Let's go with the first one first. So the first one we're going to talk about is An Abundance of Catherines by John Green. Okay, so I hated this. I literally really wanted to DNF it, but the reason I didn't was because I love The Fault in Our Stars. I love Let It Snow. They are 2 of my favourite contemporaries. And John Green, like, you know, he's a brilliant writer. I needed to give him this opportunity. Like, so I read it. And I'm going to be completely honest. I got about halfway through and I skim read the last half. So I know what happens, which wasn't much. But I did not like I hated the main character. And, you know, it's from his point of view, and I absolutely despised him so much. I didn't like, he was just so, is shallow the right word? I feel like shallow's the right word, and I despised him, and I just wanted him to get hit by a train. It didn't happen, there was no death in this, but I wanted it to happen. That's how much I hated him. And yeah, it was just, I had such high hopes for this because it was John Green, and I just absolutely despised it. And I gave it 2 stars because I do have a rule that nothing gets a 1-star from me, because if I'm hating it that much, then I DNF it. I mean, this could have been an exception, to be fair, because, you know, I wanted to DNF it, but it was just my pure stubbornness that I had to finish. I had to be able to say, I have read this book. Also, I had owned the book for 8 years. Along with the next book I'm going to talk about. I had owned them for 8 years, and I had to read it before I could justify yeeting it out of this house, which it's gone now, thankfully. So yeah, I absolutely hated it, and I'm never going to look at it ever again. Ever. And if there is a film made of it, I will not be watching it. I do not care who is in it, who's playing the main character. It's not happening, because I despised it so much. So yeah. I also couldn't actually tell you what it's about, because I have literally wiped it from my memory. That's how much I hated it. So yeah, this is definitely on my worst books. And then the second book that I'm going to talk about is Will Grayson, Will Grayson by John Green and David Levithan. Oh, this one I didn't hate quite as much as An Abundance of Catherine's. I didn't skim read half of this book. This did still get 2 stars for me though, and not gonna lie, I did hate both of the characters called Will Grayson. I really didn't like this. So I read this basically straight after finishing An Abundance of Catherine's, and I probably shouldn't have, because my hatred for that book, I feel like it projected onto this book a little bit, because I was so annoyed that I had had these books for so long and I hated the Catherine's one. So I didn't like either of the Will Graysons, because both the main characters, it's told from 2 different points of view, and they are both called Will Grayson. And yeah, I just didn't like either of them. They both had such big flaws. And again, I cannot tell you what actually happens in this, because I hated it that much. I just wiped it from my memory as well, and I never want to look at or hear about this book ever again. And whenever I see someone that's reading it, I'm like, oh, should I tell them, or should I just let them have this journey for themselves? I let them have the journey for themselves, because, you know, they might have a completely different opinion to me. But yeah, I just really absolutely hated it. I didn't like either of the characters. I didn't like any of the characters' friends either. Like I'm sorry. I just really did not like these books. But yeah, I hated this one a little bit less than The Abundance of Catherine's, like a little bit less. Next up, we have one that could cause some controversy, because everyone and their mother loves this book, and I hated it. And that's The Guest List by Lucy Foley. I had such high expectations. I received an e-arc of this, because like on NetGalley, and I was very excited to read it. And I kept seeing everyone rave about how incredible this book was. So I was like, this is going to be a 4, maybe a 5 star. I absolutely hated this book. I did not like any of the characters, and you go through the whole book knowing that someone has been murdered on this island, but you don't know who has been murdered, and you don't know who has murdered them. And that was the only thing keeping me reading. I kept almost DNFing. I absolutely hated all of the characters. The main female character was a stuck-up cow who I hated. Her fiance was a sleazy slimeball piece of trash. His friends were worse. Her sister, I think it was the only one that I could tolerate to a point, but even her I hated. I didn't like any single person. And do you know what? When you find out who's been murdered, I was at the point where I was like, I don't even care who's been murdered. I want to find out who murdered them so I can congratulate them for killing off one of these terrible people. And then I feel like it was pretty anticlimactic. Now, I will say, I did think the reasoning behind was pretty clever, but it was not logical at all. It came from nowhere. It made no sense whatsoever. And it was just so anticlimactic for me. And I absolutely hated it. And it got to that point, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, really? I really did not like this. And it was a massive disappointment for me. And yeah, it's one that if someone tells me that gonna read it. My friend actually did say, oh, I got this for 99p on Kindle. I was like, good luck with that. Like, I straight up hated this book, and I will tell people that I hated it. I will cause the controversy because everyone seems to love this book, and I'm just like, why? Like, I totally understand how everyone has different opinions, but I just don't understand why someone's opinion for this book is good, because I can't see it. Like, this is a genuine thing. Please tell me, if you've read this book and loved it, please tell me in the comments below the reason, because I genuinely don't understand how people loved this book, because I really, really hated it, and I'm really sorry that I'm like trashing your favourite book if it's your favourite, but I just really hated it, and I'm gonna stop babbling about it now because I don't want to get hate for this. And then the final book that we're going to talk about today is probably the worst book I read last year. Like, the guest list was close, and if you've seen how much I hate that book, and it's The Return by Rachel Harrison. I got this gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous, bright arc at YALC in 2019. And I didn't get around to reading it in 2019 because this is me. Of course I didn't. But to be fair, this was a giveaway. I had no obligation to read it by release date. But I did, because it was released in April. And I read it in like March, I want to say. I read it in January. I read this in January 2020. So I managed to get it read before release date, and you know, this was just an added bonus when I bought something from one of the stands at YALC. So I was like, oh, free arc, okay, don't mind if I do. So this sounds great. So her best friend disappeared, a stranger come back. That sounds gripping. How much would you give up for your best friend? Gripping. The synopsis. Do you know what? I'm actually going to read you the full synopsis for this one. Julie is missing, and the missing don't often return. But Elise knows Julie better than anyone, and she feels in her bones that her best friend is out there. She's right. 2 years to the day that Julie vanished, she reappears with no memory of what happened to her. Along with Molly and May, their two close friends from college, the women decide to reunite at the eccentric remote Red Honey Inn. But the second Elise sees Julie, she knows something is wrong. She's emaciated with sallow skin, chipped teeth and odd appetites. In so many ways, Julie seems to be the friend they all loved and lost, but in others, she seems to be a stranger. When bad weather traps them inside the hotel, tensions flare. Elise begins to hear scratching within the walls, to see the slither of shadows cast by nothing, and as the weekend unfurls, it becomes impossible to deny that the Julie who vanished 2 years ago is not the same Julie who came back. But then who, or what, is she? So this is so many genres. This is horror, this is thriller, this is mystery, it's adult. But what I did not know, that this also had a supernatural element. I didn't know that when I went into this. And to be honest, the supernatural element, I would have preferred if it wasn't supernatural. Now, if you watch my videos regularly, you know I love anything with supernatural creatures in. It's one of my favourite things. This, no. And there is, I'm just going to, this might be a bit of a spoiler, but there is a cheating aspect to this, which I did not know going into it. And that made me even angrier. You don't find out about that till like quite a way in. Oh, and that was the final straw for me. I was already hating it by that point. But you know what? I needed to know what once I knew there was a supernatural element, I needed to know what it was, and I don't actually think we got an answer to that. There was descriptions, granted, I could picture, that was great, but I don't think we actually got an answer to the question, like, what is it? And it was just such a massive disappointment, and I absolutely hated it. And yeah, I would not recommend this to anyone. If you want to put yourself through it, be my guest, go for it. But I absolutely hated it, and yeah, I hated it, and never looking at the book again. I am donating it the first bloody chance I get, because I don't want it taking up space in my house anymore. So yeah, that was my worst and most disappointing books that I read in 2020. I had a pretty good year last year for reading. I read 181 books, and of those, they were mostly 4 and 5 stars. The 3 stars that I did read, they were mostly absolutely incredible books, which I did love, but just not enough to give those extra stars. So there wasn't really any others that I hated. There actually was no others that I hated. I just... all of these were disappointments, but obviously some of them were disappointments that I still enjoyed to a certain extent. So yeah, that was my list. I finally stopped procrastinating and I've actually filmed this. I'm hoping you're going to see this pretty soon after me filming this. I'm now going to procrastinate actually editing it and uploading it because, yeah. But you know what? I did a best books of 2020. I felt like I had to do this as well because there was a significant amount that I was disappointed by and hated. So, and like, I really hope that you understand that these are my opinions, and, you know, no hate to the authors. These books were not for me. And I mean, if you look at the 2 John Green books, definitely no hate to the author, because, you know, 2 of his other books are 2 of my favourite contemporaries, especially from, I mean, The Fault in Our Stars was one of my all-time favourite books when I was a teenager. So, you know, no hate to the authors on these books. But these books were not for me, and yeah, I'm sorry. And if any of these were your favourite books, I apologise for that. But it's my opinion. And I mean, if any of these were like on your favourites list, or you like really loved them, like, please feel free to let me know what it was you loved about it, because I am actually intrigued to know, like, I love seeing people's different opinions about stuff. So obviously I'm doing this video, I'm not telling you to not buy them. In fact, if you think any of these sound like your sort of thing, go and buy it, and I hope you love it. I just didn't love them. I'm really sad about some of them. Like, some of them I had such high expectations for. I was gutted. But I'm gonna leave it there and stop babbling, because I feel like I went on a bit of a tangent about some of these. So I hope you enjoyed this video. It feels weird saying that for a worst and most disappointing list, but I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and I will see you next time, where I'm more positive about things, because I'm not doing one of these videos again until like 12 months time. See you next time. Bye.